Welcome to Ian Cinema, your destination for endless entertainment and unforgettable movie moments. Discover exciting films, inspiring stories, and cinematic journeys across every genre. Whether you love action, drama, thrillers, or timeless favorites, there's always something waiting for you here. Sit back, enjoy the experience, and let Ian Cinema bring the magic of movies to your screen. The Departed is a 2006 crime thriller directed by Martin Scorsese and written by William Monahan. The film is a remake of the acclaimed 2002 Hong Kong thriller Infernal Affairs and is loosely inspired by real-life figures, including Boston's Winter Hill Gang, corrupt FBI agent John Connolly, and notorious Irish-American crime boss Whitey Bulger. Set in South Boston, the story follows powerful Irish mob leader Frank Costello, Jack Nicholson, who secretly places Colin Sullivan, Matt Damon, inside the Massachusetts State Police as his trusted informant. At the same time, the police recruit Billy Costigan, Leonardo DiCaprio, a young state trooper, to go undercover and infiltrate Costello's criminal organization. As both men live double lives, each races to uncover the identity of the other's mole before their own cover is exposed. The film features an outstanding ensemble cast, including Mark Wahlberg, Martin Sheen, Ray Winstone, Vera Farmiga, Alec Baldwin, Anthony Anderson, and James Badgedale. The Departed premiered at New York's Ziegfeld Theatre on September 26, 2006. Before its nationwide release by Warner Bros. Pictures on October 6, 2006, the film was both a critical and commercial success, earning over $291.5 million worldwide against a $90 million budget. Critics praised its gripping direction, intense performances, particularly those of Leonardo DiCaprio, Jack Nicholson, and Mark Wahlberg, as well as William Monahan's screenplay and Thelma Schoonmaker's masterful editing. At the 79th Academy Awards, The Departed won Best Picture, Best Director for Martin Scorsese, his first and only competitive Oscar, Best Adapted Screenplay for William Monahan, and Best Film Editing for Thelma Schoonmaker. It also received 6 nominations at both the Golden Globe Awards and the British Academy Film Awards, BAFTAs, along with 2 nominations at the Screen Actors Guild Awards. The story begins in 1980s Boston, where crime boss Frank Costello takes a young Colin Sullivan under his wing, grooming him from childhood to become his informant within law enforcement. Years later, Sullivan joins the Massachusetts State Police and quickly earns a position in the Special Investigations Unit, secretly feeding information back to Costello. Meanwhile, Police Academy recruit Billy Costigan is handpicked by Captain Oliver Queenan and Sergeant Sean Dignam for an undercover assignment. To establish his criminal identity, Costigan serves time in prison as part of his cover before committing a series of crimes that turn Costello's trust. As he becomes deeply embedded within the gang, the constant danger and violence begin to take a severe psychological toll on him. Despite his deteriorating mental state, Queenan and Dignam persuade him to continue the mission. Sullivan begins a relationship with police psychiatrist Dr. Madeleine Madden, Vera Farmiga, who also becomes Costigan's court-appointed therapist. While Costigan secretly provides intelligence to the police, Sullivan continually leaks information to Costello, allowing the crime boss to stay one step ahead. One such operation involves Costello's planned sale of stolen microprocessors to Chinese gangsters, but Sullivan's warning causes the police sting to fail. Eventually, both Costello and the Massachusetts State Police realize they have been infiltrated. Sullivan is ordered to identify the undercover officer inside Costello's gang, while Costigan is tasked with uncovering the mole within the police department. During his investigation, Costigan discovers that Costello has been working as a protected FBI informant, a revelation he shares with Captain Queenan. At the same time, Costigan and Madeleine grow closer and begin a secret romantic relationship. While following Costello, Costigan witnesses him handing Sullivan an envelope containing sensitive information about his criminal organization. Unable to identify Sullivan from a distance, Costigan loses his chance to expose him. Meanwhile, Sullivan realizes someone is following him and accidentally stabs an innocent passerby while trying to escape. Suspecting Queenan is secretly meeting with the undercover officer, Sullivan tracks his movements and alerts Costello's gang. Fearing his identity has been exposed, Costigan meets with Queenan to discuss ending the operation. Before they can leave safely, Costello's men arrive. Queenan sacrifices himself to ensure Costigan escapes and is thrown from the rooftop to his death. During the violent confrontation that follows, Costello's associate Timothy Delahunt is fatally wounded. Before dying, he tells Costigan that he knows he is the undercover mole. After Queenan's murder, Sergeant Dignam angrily confronts Sullivan and is suspended from duty. Sullivan later discovers from Queenan's files that Costello has been secretly cooperating with the FBI. A news report identifies Delahunt as an undercover Boston police officer, though Costello dismisses it as a cover story meant to protect the real mole. Sullivan then leads the police to Costello, resulting in a deadly gun battle that wipes out most of the gang. During the confrontation, Sullivan shoots and kills Costello after the mob boss admits he has been working as an FBI informant. With his assignment complete, Costigan finally reveals his true identity to Sullivan. However, after spotting Costello's envelope on Sullivan's desk, he realizes Sullivan has been Costello's mole all along. Costigan escapes before Sullivan can silence him, while Sullivan secretly deletes Costigan's police records to erase any evidence of his undercover service. Before disappearing, Costigan leaves an envelope of evidence with Madeleine Madden. Inside is a recording of Sullivan's incriminating conversations with Costello, exposing his corruption. Costigan later arranges a meeting with Sullivan on the rooftop where Captain Queenan was killed. There, he arrests Sullivan at gunpoint, declaring that he possesses enough evidence to prove Sullivan's connection to Frank Costello. At that moment, State Trooper Barragan, a fellow graduate of the police academy, unexpectedly arrives, setting the stage for the film's shocking and unforgettable climax. After taking the elevator to the lobby, Costigan is suddenly shot and killed by Trooper Barragan, who reveals himself as another of Costello's undercover informants within the Massachusetts State Police. Brown is then killed by Barragan, but Sullivan immediately shoots Barragan, making it appear that he was Costello's only mole. Sullivan later recommends that Costigan receive a posthumous commendation for his service. Following Costigan's funeral, a pregnant Madeleine ends her relationship with Sullivan. When Sullivan returns home, he is confronted by Dignam, who silently shoots him before walking away. In January 2003, Warner Brothers Pictures and producers Brad Gray and Brad Pitt acquired the remake rights to the 2002 Hong Kong crime thriller Infernal Affairs from MediaAsia Entertainment Group for $1.75 million. Screenwriter William Monahan was hired to adapt the story, and Martin Scorsese, who greatly admired Monahan's screenplay, signed on to direct the project. By March 2004, United Press International reported that Scorsese would relocate the story from Hong Kong to Boston, with Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt initially attached to star. Pitt was originally considered for the role of Sullivan but ultimately stepped away, believing the character would be better suited to a younger actor. Instead, he remained involved as one of the film's producers. Scorsese's longtime collaborator Kenneth Lonergan suggested Boston native Matt Damon for the role of Sullivan, while Jack Nicholson was personally invited by Scorsese to portray the ruthless crime boss Frank Costello. Robert De Niro was approached to play Captain Queenan but declined the role to focus on directing The Good Shepherd. Scorsese later explained that De Niro simply wasn't interested in taking the part. Actor Ray Liotta was also offered the role but had to decline because of prior commitments. Nicholson wanted the film to offer something beyond a conventional gangster story. In response, Monahan drew inspiration from notorious Irish-American mobster Whitey Bulger when developing the character of Frank Costello. This decision added a greater sense of realism and unpredictability to the screenplay, reflecting the controversial relationship between Bulger and the FBI. which granted him extraordinary freedom in exchange for information about rival criminals. To ensure authenticity, the production hired Tom Duffy as a technical consultant. Duffy had spent more than 30 years with the Boston Police Department, including extensive experience working undercover against the Irish mob. Warner Brothers officially greenlit The Departed in early 2005, and principal photography began on April 18 of that year. While several scenes were filmed on location in Boston, many interior sequences were shot on sound stages and real locations in New York City because its tax incentives made production significantly more cost-effective than filming entirely in Boston. Warner Brothers Pictures secured worldwide distribution rights for the film, excluding the United Kingdom, Ireland, France, Belgium, Italy, the CIS, China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. Distribution in those territories was handled by regional companies, including entertainment film distributors in the UK and Ireland, TFM Distribution in France, Medusa Distribution in Italy, Belga Films in Belgium, Central Partnership in Russia and Ukraine, Mediasia Distribution in China and Hong Kong, and Longsheng in Taiwan. Film critic Stanley Kaufman observed that The Departed explores the timeless dramatic theme of identity and examines how hidden identities shape a person's actions, emotions, self-awareness, and even dreams. Although he appreciated the concept, Kaufman felt the film did not communicate the theme as effectively as it could have. Roger Ebert, on the other hand, compared Costigan's and Sullivan's constant search for approval from the very people they were deceiving to a form of Stockholm Syndrome. He also highlighted the film's recurring theme of Catholic guilt, which influences several of the characters' moral struggles. One of the film's most memorable visual symbols appears in the final scene, where Rand crawls across Sullivan's balcony railing. Scorsese explained that the image is not meant to be interpreted literally but instead serves as a symbolic reminder of the hunt for the rat throughout the story and the overwhelming atmosphere of mistrust that defines the film. The city skyline behind the rat also pays tribute to classic gangster films such as Little Caesar, 1931, Scarface, 1932, and White Heat, 1949. The penultimate scene, in which Madeleine walks past Sullivan during Costigan's funeral without even looking at him, is a deliberate visual homage to the closing moments of The Third Man. Throughout The Departed, Scorsese repeatedly uses X-shaped imagery to foreshadow death, echoing the visual technique employed by Howard Hawks in Scarface, 1932. These subtle X motifs appear in numerous scenes, including the crossbeam supports at the airport walkway while Costigan speaks with Sergeant Dignam, the illuminated X on the wall of Sullivan's office as he assures Costello that Costigan is not the informant, the taped windows of the building Queenan enters before his fatal fall, the exposition behind Costigan's head inside the elevator before he is shot, and the patterned hallway carpet outside Sullivan's apartment shortly before Dignam kills him. The Departed was a major commercial success, earning approximately $132 million in the United States and Canada and an additional $159 million internationally, for a worldwide total of $291.5 million against a production budget of $90 million. The film opened with $26.9 million during its first weekend, making it the fourth Martin Scorsese film to debut at number 1 at the North American box office. It also remains the most recent Best Picture Academy Award winner to open at the top of the box office. Over the following weeks, the film continued to perform strongly, earning $19 million, $13.5 million, and $9.8 million in its next 3 weekends, finishing second each time before collecting another $7.7 million and dropping to 5th place in its 5th weekend. According to the review aggregation website Rotten Tomatoes, The Departed holds a 91% approval rating based on 285 critic reviews, with an average score of 8.4 out of 10, reflecting widespread critical acclaim for Scorsese's gripping crime thriller. The Departed received widespread critical acclaim. The critics' consensus praised the film by stating, Featuring outstanding work from an excellent cast, The Departed is a thoroughly engrossing gangster drama with a gritty authenticity and morally complex storytelling we've come to expect from Martin Scorsese. On Metacritic, the film earned a weighted average score of 85 out of 100, based on 39 critics, indicating universal acclaim. CinemaScore audiences also responded enthusiastically, awarding the film an A grade on a scale from A+ to F. Entertainment Weekly included The Departed on its list of the decade's best films. Writing: if they're lucky, directors make one classic film in their career. Martin Scorsese has made one every decade: Taxi Driver in the 1970s, Raging Bull in the 1980s, Goodfellas in the 1990s, and his 2006 Irish Mafia masterpiece kept the remarkable streak alive. Renowned critic Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times awarded the film a perfect 4 out of 4 stars, praising Scorsese for giving the remake its own distinct identity rather than simply copying the original. Online critic James Berardinelli also gave the film 4 out of 4 stars, describing it as an American epic tragedy worthy of standing alongside Scorsese's greatest works, including Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, and Goodfellas. The film also earned praise from those involved with the original Infernal Affairs. Co-director Andrew Lau told Hong Kong's Apple Daily, "Of course, I think the version I made is better, but the Hollywood version is pretty good too." He appreciated how Scorsese successfully adapted the story to suit American culture. Actor Randy Lau, one of the stars of Infernal Affairs, offered a more mixed opinion. He felt The Departed was longer than necessary and remarked that it seemed as though Hollywood had combined all 3 Infernal Affairs films into a single movie. While he admired several memorable lines of dialogue, he believed the screenplay relied too heavily on profanity. Even so, he gave the film 8 out of 10, calling it a remake that was worth watching. According to his spokeswoman, Alice Tam, he also felt that merging the 2 major female characters into one weakened the story compared to the original. Not every critic was impressed. Jay Hoberman of The Village Voice argued that while Infernal Affairs was cool, restrained, and tightly controlled, Scorsese's version amplified every violent confrontation. He felt the heightened aggression and frequent use of offensive language made the film excessively intense. Despite a handful of mixed reviews, The Departed appeared on numerous critics' lists of the best films of 2006. Critics including Carrie Rickey of the Philadelphia Inquirer, Joe Morgenstern of the Wall Street Journal, Rothstein of the San Francisco Chronicle, and Stephen Hunter of the Washington Post ranked it among their top films of the year. Richard Roeper of the Chicago Sun-Times later named it the best film of the 2000s. The film also enjoyed tremendous success during awards season. At the 64th Golden Globe Awards on January 15, 2007, The Departed won Best Director for Martin Scorsese. It also received nominations for Best Picture, Best Actor, Leonardo DiCaprio, Best Supporting Actor, Jack Nicholson and Mark Wahlberg, and Best Screenplay for William Monahan. Its greatest triumph came at the 79th Academy Awards on February 25, 2007, where The Departed won 4 Oscars: Best Picture for producer Graham King, Best Director for Martin Scorsese, Best Film Editing for Thelma Schoonmaker, and Best Adapted Screenplay for William Monahan. Mark Wahlberg also received a nomination for Best Supporting Actor, though the award ultimately went to Alan Arkin for A Little Miss Sunshine. The victory marked Martin Scorsese's first Academy Award for Best Director after 5 previous nominations. Many believed he should have won years earlier for earlier masterpieces, and some viewed the Oscar as long overdue recognition for his extraordinary career rather than just for The Departed. Scorsese himself joked about the win, saying, "I won because this is the first movie I've made with a plot." At the 11th Satellite Awards on December 18, 2006, The Departed won Best Motion Picture A Drama, Best Ensemble, Best Adapted Screenplay for William Monahan, and Best Supporting Actor for Leonardo DiCaprio, adding yet another chapter to the film's remarkable awards success. In 2008, The Departed was nominated for the American Film Institute's list of the top 10 gangster films. In 2021, members of the Writers Guild of America West, GA, and the Writers Guild of America East, GAE, ranked William Monahan's screenplay 30th on the WGA's list of the 101 greatest screenplays of the 21st century. The film's reputation continued to grow, and in 2025 it was ranked 31st on the New York Times list of the 100 best movies of the 21st century, while readers placed it 25th in the publication's Reader's Choice edition. The Departed was released on DVD, HD DVD, and Blu-ray by Warner Home Video on February 13, 2007. It was made available in both a standard single-disc edition and a two-disc special edition. The special edition includes deleted scenes, a featurette exploring the influence of New York's Little Italy on Martin Scorsese, a Turner Classic Movies profile, the theatrical trailer, and a 21-minute documentary titled Stranger Than Fiction: The True Story of Whitey Bulger, Southie, and The Departed. The documentary examines the real-life crimes that inspired the film, particularly those of James Whitey Bulger, the notorious Boston crime boss who served as the inspiration for Jack Nicholson's character, Frank Costello. The film later received an Ultra HD Blu-ray release on April 23, 2024. The film's original score was composed by Howard Shore and performed by renowned guitarists Sherry Nice-Bin, G. E. Smith, Larry Saltzman, and Mark Ribot. The score was recorded at Shore Studios in New York and released on December 5, 2006, by New Line Records, with Jason Sheenkus serving as producer. Shore described the music as a very dangerous and lethal tango, drawing inspiration from the guitar-driven score of Murder by Contract and the haunting zither music featured in The Third Man. The soundtrack also incorporates themes from Gaetano Donizetti's opera Lucia di Lammermoor. Throughout the film, Frank Costello is frequently shown listening to the opera, and its theme even serves as his cell phone ringtone. Although many of the film's major characters meet tragic ends, a sequel was once considered. A script was reportedly written, but the project was eventually abandoned due to high production costs and Martin Scorsese's lack of interest in continuing the story. This stands in contrast to the original Hong Kong film, Infernal Affairs, which was expanded with both a prequel and a sequel to further develop its storyline. Whether or not one agrees with the debate surrounding Martin Scorsese's reputation, there's no denying his remarkable filmmaking ability. That talent is on full display in The Departed, a gripping American remake of the acclaimed Hong Kong crime thriller Infernal Affairs. While the film occasionally feels longer than necessary and features an exceptionally high level of strong language, it remains an absorbing and expertly crafted crime drama. Ironically, the original Chinese film contained only a handful of mild profanities, whereas The Departed is filled with constant swearing that reflects the harsh environment of Boston's criminal underworld. Viewers who can look past the explicit language will find a tense, emotionally charged thriller with outstanding performances and compelling storytelling. The film stars Leonardo DiCaprio as Billy Costigan and Matt Damon as Colin Sullivan, two young Irish-American recruits in the Massachusetts State Police whose lives become intertwined in a deadly game of deception. Billy Costigan is secretly assigned to go undercover and infiltrate the criminal organization led by the ruthless gangster Frank Costello, played by Jack Nicholson. Coming from a South Boston family with a history of petty crime, Billy is able to blend naturally into Costello's inner circle. Only his two superiors, Captain Oliver Queenan, Martin Sheen, and Sergeant Sean Dignam, Mark Wahlberg, know his true identity. To strengthen his cover, Billy is given a fabricated criminal record, making it appear that his violent temper cost him his police career and landed him in prison. Once back on the streets, he slowly earns Costello's trust, though not before enduring painful tests designed to prove he isn't secretly working for law enforcement. Meanwhile, Colin Sullivan, who also grew up in South Boston, has spent years serving as Costello's mole inside the Massachusetts State Police. As a respected member of the elite Special Investigations Unit, Colin secretly feeds confidential information to Costello, allowing the crime boss to stay one step ahead of every police operation. Eventually, both sides realize they have been infiltrated. Costello and Colin become convinced that someone within the gang is working for the police, while Billy and the authorities discover that Costello has a spy hidden inside the Special Investigations Unit. Captain Queenan and Sergeant Dignam are the only people who know Billy's identity, making them the final obstacle preventing Colin from uncovering the truth. What follows is an intense cat-and-mouse battle filled with mounting tension, shifting loyalties, and unexpected twists. The screenplay constantly keeps the audience guessing, creating a suspenseful game in which every move could prove fatal. Compared to Infernal Affairs, the American remake introduces additional layers of complexity, making the plot even more intricate. The film's thick Boston accents can occasionally be difficult to understand, particularly during the opening scenes. Even so, the exceptional direction, outstanding performances, and richly developed characters more than compensate. The dramatic tension between the opposing undercover operatives is consistently engaging, and the conflict between their identities drives the story forward. That said, the film isn't without flaws. Because the narrative is so densely woven, some viewers have pointed out a few noticeable plot holes. For instance, both Billy and Colin come from the same South Boston neighborhood and possess extensive knowledge of Frank Costello's criminal network, raising questions about how certain details remain hidden for so long. Even with these minor issues, The Departed stands as one of the finest crime thrillers of the 21st century, combining stellar performances, razor-sharp direction, and unforgettable suspense into a modern classic. One aspect of The Departed that stretches believability is the idea that Billy Costigan and Colin Sullivan never truly crossed paths while growing up. The film attempts to explain this by showing Frank Costello as Colin's only direct contact, while Captain Queenan and Sergeant Dignam are the only people who communicate with Billy. Even so, the explanation isn't entirely convincing. Both Billy and Colin grew up in South Boston, knew Costello, and trained at the police academy around the same time. While South Boston is certainly a large community, it's still difficult to believe that neither man would recognize or become suspicious of the other. Fortunately, these narrative inconsistencies are overshadowed by the film's exceptional craftsmanship. Martin Scorsese's confident direction, sharp editing, striking cinematography, compelling performances, and richly developed characters keep the story gripping from beginning to end. Every member of the cast delivers a memorable performance, but Leonardo DiCaprio stands out as Billy Costigan, bringing remarkable emotional intensity and vulnerability to the role. Mark Wahlberg is equally impressive as the foul-mouthed yet fiercely loyal Sergeant Dignam, delivering one of the film's most unforgettable performances. Jack Nicholson naturally commands attention as Frank Costello, the film's most flamboyant character. Although the role resembles several of the larger-than-life characters he has played throughout his career, Nicholson still gives one of his strongest performances. A familiar role does not diminish its quality, and great actors often find fresh nuances in similar characters. John Wayne, for example, frequently portrayed heroic figures, yet each performance carried its own distinct personality and depth. Nicholson achieves something similar here, making Costello both entertaining and deeply unsettling. For most of its runtime, The Departed maintains outstanding momentum. However, the ending lingers longer than necessary with a series of concluding scenes that can feel like multiple endings. Many viewers may not mind because each sequence is filled with tension, action, and shocking violence. As a result, these extended conclusions are less distracting than the multiple endings that some audiences criticized in The Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King. Even so, The film would likely have been stronger with a more concise finale. The story unfolds in a harsh and morally complicated world where trust is scarce and even honorable police officers are forced to make difficult ethical choices. Although the narrative largely follows Billy and his two principled superiors, it also makes clear that Frank Costello and his ruthless lieutenant, Mr. French, portrayed with chilling intensity by Ray Winstone, represent genuine evil. At one crucial moment, one of the film's honorable officers resorts to an act of vigilante justice, highlighting one of the movie's central moral ideas. Violence and corruption may prevail for a time, but they cannot escape justice forever. Eventually, those who embrace murder, betrayal, and lawlessness are held accountable for their actions. Scorsese and screenwriter William Monahan reinforced this theme through subtle but meaningful religious imagery. References to Jesus Christ, the Virgin Mary, and Roman Catholic funeral traditions emphasize the story's moral and spiritual dimensions. Even the title, The Departed, echoes the Roman Catholic expression the faithful departed, referring to those who have died in the faith. These religious elements are woven naturally into the narrative, giving the film a thoughtful Roman Catholic perspective and adding layers of meaning that reward closer examination. Despite these strengths, the film presents a relatively liberal interpretation of its Christian worldview. It includes a brief criticism of the Patriot Act through ironic dialogue and contains a few pointed remarks about the leadership of the Catholic Church, particularly concerning the sexual abuse scandals and the attempts by some clergy to conceal them. The film also occasionally blurs the moral distinction between law enforcement and organized crime. This idea is reflected in the movie's tagline, "Cops or criminals? When you're facing a loaded gun, what's the difference?" While the story is firmly rooted in the biblical concept of a fallen world inhabited by flawed human beings, it also suggests that God remains somewhat distant from the ongoing struggle between good and evil, allowing human choices to determine the outcome. The film's Christian worldview is presented in a way that some viewers may find as flawed as many of its characters. The Departed is a controversial film, largely because of its relentless use of strong profanity, frequent graphic violence, critical portrayal of the Catholic Church, and the bleak, morally broken world in which the story unfolds. One scene features Colin Sullivan secretly meeting Frank Costello in the theater showing adult films. During the encounter, Costello startles Colin by waving a highly realistic rubber sex toy as a crude joke, removing this unnecessary gag, reducing the excessive profanity, and giving the story a more hopeful conclusion would have made The Departed more morally and spiritually acceptable to many viewers. These changes might also have strengthened the film as a work of art while making it even more entertaining. Some critics argue that if director Martin Scorsese returned more consistently to the biblical and Christian themes that influenced parts of his earlier work, while embracing more traditional dramatic storytelling, his films could become even stronger artistically, theologically, morally, and philosophically. They also suggest such an approach might appeal to an even broader audience. Others believe, however, that this could reduce the critical praise he often receives from secular film critics. From a Christian perspective, the highest goal should not be seeking human approval but pursuing God's glory and righteousness through Jesus Christ. Inspired by the acclaimed 2002 Hong Kong crime thriller Infernal Affairs, The Departed reimagines the story as a gritty American gangster drama under the direction of Martin Scorsese. The film follows two young men living double lives on opposite sides of the law. As a child, Colin Sullivan is taken under the wing of ruthless Irish crime boss Frank Costello, who carefully grooms him to become a respected citizen, attend the police academy, and ultimately serve as the mob's insider within the Massachusetts State Police. As Sullivan rises through the ranks of the organized crime unit, he becomes perfectly positioned to keep Costello one step ahead of law enforcement. Billy Costigan, by contrast, dreams of serving as an honest police officer despite his family's long-standing ties to Costello's criminal world. Because of his background, The police select him to infiltrate Costello's organization as an undercover operative. As a result, Sullivan secretly works for the mob while Costigan secretly works for the police, with neither man knowing the other's true identity. When both Costello and the police realize they each have a mole within their ranks, a deadly race begins. Sullivan and Costigan must discover each other's identities before they were exposed, a challenge made even more dangerous as the body count steadily rises, adding another layer of tension. Both men become romantically involved with Middelin, a police psychiatrist who has no idea that each of them is hiding a dangerous double life. Despite the film's famous tagline, "Cops are criminals, so when you're facing a loaded gun, what's the difference?" The Departed largely avoids embracing moral relativism. The story makes it clear that Frank Costello and his criminal associates are villains. Viewers are never encouraged to admire Sullivan's loyalty to the mob or to condemn Costigan for risking everything in service of the law. Although the film is filled with disturbing content and much of it driven by Costello's unmistakable evil, it ultimately encourages the audience to hope for justice, even when that justice comes through violent and tragic circumstances. Characters who willingly risk their lives to protect others are portrayed as honorable, while those who kill for greed, power, or self-interest are clearly condemned. Many of the South Boston characters, whether police officers or criminals, share an Irish Catholic heritage, although few actively practice their faith. As a child, Sullivan serves as an altar boy. Scripture is quoted during more than one funeral, and the camera briefly focuses on a memorial card that reads, "Heaven holds the faithful departed." Costello's girlfriend also mentions attending confession and choir practice. In sharp contrast stands Frank Costello, whose deeply corrupt character is reflected in his contempt for religion. He repeatedly mocks Catholic priests with offensive insults, boasts about inappropriate sexual encounters before a woman became a nun, and reinforces his stories with crude drawings. Throughout the film, Costello blames the church for many of society's problems, arguing that those who follow its teachings become weak, obedient, and incapable of independent thought. The dialogue throughout the film is dominated by relentless profanity and aggressive insults exchanged by both criminals and police officers. Much of the language contains explicit sexual references intended to shock or humiliate. Conversations include repeated vulgar slang describing sexual acts and anatomy, along with crude remarks involving oral and anal sex, incest, pedophilia, homosexuality, masturbation, and adolescent sexuality. Costello and his girlfriend also engage in sexually explicit conversations, and the film implies off-screen sexual activity between them. Costello also solicits the services of a prostitute during a clandestine meeting at a porn theater. We see quick flashes of what's going on screen. Costello pulls a dildo out of his pants as a joke. Both Sullivan and Costigan have a sexual relationship with Meline. Much of their goings-on are either implied or talked about later, but in one extended scene, Costigan and Meline are seen as stripping down to their underwear and beginning an encounter. Scorsese plus gangsters equals frequent brutal violence, often presented casually to emphasize the moral emptiness of the characters. Early in the film, a police instructor describes to a room full of cadets the effects of a hollow-point bullet on the human body. As the story progresses, we witness said blood splatter and blowback as a dozen or so characters take bullets to the head from a close range. One man shoots himself, others get shot in the chest, legs, a stomach, etc. with bloody results. Brutal beatings are administered with the fists, feet, and blunt instruments, resulting in lost teeth, gashes, and more blood. A lingerie-clad woman is briefly seen being choked to death with a wire by her husband. A man is stabbed. Punches are exchanged almost as a manner of greeting. Multiple mangled and gore-covered corpses get screen time. Costello is at various times seen covered in blood and waving a severed human hand around. He severely beats Costigan's already broken wrist with a boot. Another police officer falls to his death from atop a building. He is seen falling and then lying in an expanding pool of blood. I've never been to Boston, so I can't personally verify whether fiction follows fact, but guys in movies from South Boston probably say the F word more than those from any other region. Here, their shared totally inflated obscenities climbs well into the 200s. It almost seems silly to add that the sword gets worked out about 25 times. Jesus and God's names are abused about 15 times. Jesus is combined with the F word, God's with the N. As for the sexual slang already alluded to, extreme terms as C, K, and C, T are both carelessly tossed around for even more color, as I were. Smoking and drinking are basically a background noise here. It's the hardest stuff that gets all the attention. Costigan develops an addiction to prescription painkillers. Oxycontin among them. Costello is seen high on cocaine, throwing the stuff around like a baby powder, about to engage in sexual activity with a prostitute. He tells Hera to stick her face in the powder until she's numb. He also participates in buying and selling drugs as part of his mob operations. Costello and others use racial epithets freely and hurtfully. Italian, Irish, African American, Puerto Rican, and Chinese ethnicities area particularly called out. In some ways, The Departed delivers exactly what you would expect from a Scorsese grimy movie. Well-crafted storytelling, impressive tough guy performances from a crackerjack cast, and several truckloads of brutal graphic violence and harshly obscene language, especially and endlessly the F word. What might be unexpected is that even at nearly 70, Jack Nicholson is both the most profane and the most riveting thing on screen. He's like the Joker gone bad. A deviant, a conscience-free mob boss, completely convincing as a magnet for these tall young cops who love and despise him, and utterly overwhelming the earnest performances of Leonardo DiCaprio and Matt Damon. Largely because of him, fans of the genre will likely add this to the list of iconic gangster films, a list which already includes Scorsese's own Goodfellas and Mean Streets. Some of those hardcore fans may actually complain The Departed isn't quite tough enough, and that's because Scorsese has taken a little of the edge off the violent tone, but certainly not the violent content to service the clever Shakespearean plot. He even throws in several moments of outright humor. For those looking for meaning in between the spatter shots, there's a singular and blaring dark and darker message. It's so hard out there for a rat. Thought DiCaprio's Costigan remains true to his mission. The evil he performs in the name of good leaves an indelible stain he can trub out, whether you're ready for the good guys or the bad guys. A duplicity and betrayal always costs you your soul. Scorsese says, even if you scam your way to some version of fast success, you can never really win. Liars die inside and then they just plain die. Or those looking to eat popcorn along with their movie, or enthusiasts possessing even a small amount of moral discernment and decorum, or even fans of the much tamer Hong Kong original, most will feel they've stumbled into a drug dealer's locker room in South Boston, with a stench of blood and gunpowder and brain matter splattered on the wall. The Departed is a 2006 crime film directed by Martin Scorsese and starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Matt Damon, and Jack Nicholson. It is a very entertaining boutique copyrighted film. The Departed's plot is very formulaic, and I've seen this type of story countless times before. You have a mole from each side, one in the gang and one in the police. And that a theme of mistaken identity is done to a death by now. However, whereas I found its plot to be cliched, I still found it to be incredibly entertaining and fun to watch. And that is a rarity for me because I usually strongly dislike gangster flicks, but this one was mostly engaging. The characters are good, but they are still archetypes. Billy is probably the strongest character here, the one audiences can relate to most. Colin is the opposite, very unlikable, but he serves his purpose. Frank is a typical mobster character who doesn't differentiate himself from others of the same type. Dignam is very annoying. Madden is quite good and all of the others aren't memorable. The acting is particularly good with Leonardo DiCaprio and Matt Damon being the standouts. both are giving great performances. Jack Nicholson is also quite good as Isavira Armiga, but Mark Wahlberg's the performance is very overrated. The Departed's main problem has to be its length. It never makes a case for it, ending in a very prolonged, overanga film with a particularly dragging third act. I just felt that the entire movie could have been shortened by at least a half an hour and it would have been much better. In terms of storytelling, it is well crafted, but as I said, standard, but its entertainment value is strong. I found the pacing to be very beta too long, too dragging, and sometimes it contains some unnecessary sequences. It is well directed by Martin Sheen and very well acted. It is also well shot and solidly scored, but its use of various popular songs bothered me. Also, most of those songs were highly annoying to me. The movie is also never as emotional as it could have been, and it is also not as dramatic. It is mostly intense and dramatic, but if it were shorter, the effect would have been stronger. I respect this movie for not going into overly repulsive and violent territory, and that is one of the reasons why I liked it despite me not liking the genre. Its structure is also solid with a very strong first act, and the film does have some terrific action sequences. The Departed is famous for being the film that finally garnered his Oscar both for directing and best film, and I agree that both are undeserved as that year had some particularly strong best picture nominees. Its wins for screenplay and editing are also not fair, and the fact that Mark Wahlberg was the only actor here nominated is just ludicrous to me when his performance is both overrated and forgettable. DiCaprio and Damon should have been nominated as they were much better. Overall, The Departed caught me by surprise how entertaining and solid it is, but it is still too cliched to be enjoyed more. It has been a little under 20 years since The Departed finally won Martin Scorsese Oscars for Best Picture and Best Director. In the aftermath of the film's success, The Departed has acquired something of a reputation as a minor work for Scorsese. It's fun, the thinking goes, yet relatively unimportant, especially compared to his weighty late period trifecta of Silence, 2016, The Irishman, 2019, and Killers of the Flower Moon, 2023. This sort of thinking is understandable, but misguided. The Departed is a wildly entertaining picture, a favorite of dorm rooms and movie guides and casual filmgoers alike. It was a hit in theaters and remains a hit on cable and streaming. The kind of movie you can easily jump into halfway through and watch until the closing credits. It's a thrilling, hilarious, and one of the most effortlessly entertaining movies of the 21st century. But being entertaining it does not make something minor. In fact, it's part of what makes the film great as well. The Departed is not actually effortless. It only looks effortless. Every shot, cut, needle drop, and vulgar rejoinder from Billy Monahan's script lands with such precision that you think the film was just pure confection, and no nutrition. The film moves with a furious momentum. You almost don't notice that 15 minutes go by before the opening title drops, and the whole 2.5 hours play as a breeze. Especially compared to Scorsese's plotting trifecta already mentioned. There are two simple shots midway through the film that capture the electric momentum of this picture. The supporting characters, Mark Wahlberg's staff, Sergeant Dignam and Alec Baldwin's Captain Ellerby, argue over access to resources during a staffer meeting at the police station. The camera trucks and pangs in a whoosh in one direction while framing Wahlberg's face and then cuts to do the exact mirrored movement for Baldwin's response. This sort of visual storytelling is proof of the film's precision, mirroring shots that bring the themes of duality into the show's construction. Constant energy, a laser focus on narrative and character, and moving the story forward while keeping the viewer engaged. The Departed is a film of substance in terms of character and construction, and theme is a bonus, but the substance is masked by the film's immense entertainment value. Like so many great Hollywood films, perhaps the greatest ones, The entertainment factor of The Departed makes the film's substance all but invisible. The liquor goes down smooth. It's useful to briefly compare The Departed to the film it's based on, Alana Mark and Felix Jang's Infernal Affairs. Infernal Affairs is also a remarkably film, but it's more somber and fixated on the tragic intertwining fates of cops and criminals than its remake. Both films share a basic plot, but while Infernal Affairs leans more into the weight of its classical storytelling, The Departed feels more like pure entertainment. But make no mistake, The Departed is a weighty picture as well. It's a brilliant character piece and interrogation of identity that seems even more perceptive in retrospect. Although perhaps accidental, the film interrogates the way that people in the modern world are constantly constructing identities and negotiating the way they present themselves to the various subcultures that dominate their environments. In 2024, creating an identity whole cloth via the internet is the norm. In 2006, such an interrogation of identity creation seemed more novel, less timely. But the added years have allowed us to see how the film's cat-and-mouse game between a cop pretending to be a crook, Leonardo DiCaprio, robbed of an Oscar at the time, and a crook pretending to be a cop, Matt Damon, as weaselly as he's ever been. It's not just crime movie fun, it almost becomes a horror movie about how the roles we play end up consuming us. The identities we try to create, erasing the very people we are. The Departed perceptively explores the weight of expectations, the limitations of class, and the ways that some people are able to flip seamlessly between one social class to another, while others are incapable of ever truly fitting in. Think of the early scene where Martin Sheen's kindly Captain Quinlan informs DiCaprio's Billy Costigan that he will never be a cop because of who his family is. Billy's dejection and quiet acceptance of Quinlan's words are all you need to know that what he said is true. Billy can never outrun his upbringing. Speaking of DiCaprio, he's excellent in the role. At the time, DiCaprio was still in the reinvention period of his career, where he transitioned from a heartthrob to serious actor capable of tough guy roles. His work with Scorsese, especially in this film and the Gangs of New York, was a naked bid to gain more respect in the industry and benefits with a certain subset of viewers. At the time, I recall being surprised that DiCaprio could play such a convincing badass. In retrospect, he realized he's only half convincing, which is a feature, not a bug. DiCaprio's Billy Costigan is trying so hard to be something he's not at all times in the film. He's like a child who desperately wants approval from a father that won't give him the time of day. His two father figures here, Sheen Quinlan and Jack Nicholson's deranged crime boss, Frank Costello, to give him some of what he needs, but hardly in ways that fulfill him. He wants to be the good cop to one, the good foot soldier for the other, but both are ultimately using him to forward their ends and play out the game against their counterpart. Thus, DiCaprio's an open wound here and shockingly vulnerable. His quieter moments with Vera Farmiga psychiatrist turned love interest Meline register particularly strongly. In one scene, Billy talks about being in the room with a psychopath and the mental fortitude he needed to ensure that one's hand doesn't shake despite the fear gripping you inside. DiCaprio's hand is steady in the scene, but his voice is not. It wavers, shaking in place of his hand, betraying the fear and discomfort that overwhelms him. He's excellent, heartbreaking, which makes his tragic end all the more painful. Damon is also at his best, also the scumbag Shy Colin Sullivan, who has been playing the choir boy all his life at the behest of Frank Costello. We literally see him as a choir boy in the childhood scenes to start the film. Damon is typically cast as a heroic leading man, but he might be best when he's playing characters who are hiding pathologies behind the facade of heroism. His best performance might be Tom Ripley in The Talented Mr. Ripley in 1999, and even his cameo appearance in Christopher Nolan's Interstellar 2014 draws on his talent for hiding malevolence within conventionally heroic attributes. Damon might not have as many quiet, vulnerable moments as DiCaprio, but in many ways he's the prime mover of the film is his insatiable appetite for more power and more prestige. Just think of the massive apartment he moves into, which the realtor guarantees will make him upper class in a week, forces him to play everyone against everyone. His self-righteous indignation in moments is truly disgusting. But Damon is also a charismatic and funny here, so we never grow tired of watching Colin make only a bad decision after another, screwing over one more ally after another. Of course, the cruel irony of The Departed is that neither men are able to survive via such an arduous process of play acting, as their environment ultimately cannot accommodate their constantly changing identities. Only two key characters are left standing in the end. Verifar Armiga's bereft Meline, who realizes the man she was going to marry was so responsible for the death of the one she loved, and Mark Wahlberg's Damon, who refuses to compromise his ethics or identity. It's fitting then that Colin's downfall comes at the hand of Damon, who returns to clean house and provides the retribution that the larger system is incapable of delivering due to its systemic dysfunctions. The film's ending is remarkably cynical and perceptive about the larger failures of the system and this particular cultural environment writ large. But the ending does not play like a season finale of The Wire. It's not somber. Buddha rather ends with a cheeky visual gag as a rat runs along Colin's apartment railing while his corpse bleeds out in the foreground. Again, the entertainment serves as a Trojan horse for the larger thematic lesson. Like the central characters, it presents as one thing, reveals another, and plays with our expectations constantly. The film's quiet intelligence is further proof that The Departed is not just great entertainment, but a great work of art. The hype is right about one thing: The Departed is certainly a return to form for Martin Scorsese. There is, however, a difference between the returning to form and returning to back of form. And this is where the remake of the much superior Infernal Affairs can't quite justify all its praise. It is stylish and fun, but fairly empty when all is said and done. Here's how a Scorsese proves to you that you are watching a Scorsese film. Within the first 2 minutes, we have seen a winding tracking shot move around and into a storefront as the Rolling Stone as a gimme shelter blur on the soundtrack. Watching The Departed is experiencing that moment over and over again as it becomes clear that the justification for the film is watching Marty do Marty. And don't get me wrong, nobody does it better except Marty himself, who has done it better several times in the past. The plot twists and snakes for the entire 2.5-hour running time and is therefore impossible to recap. But the situation is thus: Colin Sullivan, Matt Damon, is a gangster who has infiltrated the Boston Police Department. Billy Costigan, Leonardo DiCaprio, is a policeman who has infiltrated the gang. On the side of the police, we find a competent, Martin Sheen, and the foul-mouthed Jugnem, Mark Wilby. Their opposite is Frank Costello, played by Jack and Nicholson. Yes, all in caps like that because there have been very few times when a Jack Nicholson performance has been so big. Discussing The Departed necessarily means discussing Jack's performance. The man loves playing a villain. We all know that and we often love him for it. But from time to time there is a role in which he gets so camped up and intense that it becomes a liability, and this is a grand example of that. I do not know how a director like Scorsese allowed such an imbalancing element into his film, but it is there and it is scary. Perhaps Nicholson's desire was to play for the role so negligible comedy. Perhaps he found it funny to speak with a Boston accent and couldn't concentrate. All we have to go on is the performance, which is not really part of the rest of the film. Whatever is left to chew in after the scenery is all gone. That is what Jack is chewing in. If it weren't so shockingly inappropriate, it would be hilarious. The rest of the performances range from decent to great, and it's unfortunate that the lower end of that spectrum is populated by the leads. DiCaprio and Damon are both fine actors, but they are not particularly well acted here, mostly because they are not very well written. In Infernal Affairs, Angelo and Tony Leung played conflicted men who lose their identities and then find them again, except that their new identities are not entirely right. It is a film of surprising moral depth for a Hong Kong cop picture. In The Departed, Coston and Sullivan are respectively a lapsed Catholic and a more lapsed Catholic. It is a Scorsese film after all, and Catholic guilt is the central theme of just about every great film in his career. But Catholic guilt is noted the same thing as moral pressure, even when it is a component, and there is nothing but guilt driving the lead characters. Sheen and Wahlberg and the terribly undersold Alec Baldwin are all much better. It's becoming more and more obvious these days that Baldwin is a terrific supporting player. He can't help himself but to steal every scene he's in. As the FBI agent in charge of a sting against Costello's crew, he is so playful and lewd, and just when only he could be forgiven for wondering how he came to be in charge of anything, he becomes dominating. His delivery turns to the line, "The Patriot Act, love it," and to the best moment of the film. Sheen and Wahlberg don't hit quite the same heights, but they're both fine at playing decidedly cliched parts. Even though Sheen sometimes seems to be channeling President Bartlett. But let's be honest. The star of the movie and an actor. It's Martin Scorsese. After barely managing to convince myself that The Aviator was worthwhile and failing to even see Gangs of New York, it's a breath of fresh air that The Departed is pretty self-evidently good. It's just that it's not great, and that's kind of scary. It's easy to accuse most of the last 15 years of his career as being the result of a man far outside of his comfort zone, but here he's squarely in his usual territory and the results lack the energy and invention of his best films. It looks and feels like a Scorsese picture, but watered down, like a group of film students mounted a shot-for-shot remake of Mean Streets. There's nothing here he hasn't done before, and towards the end, when things turn violent, it starts to run out of steam entirely, as though Marty has actually come to the point where he doesn't want to shoot gore anymore. Which is his ride, but then he should go ahead and not shoot gore rather than let the film go so flat during its climax, ending the film as he does with a cute visual pun just borders on insulting. And it's worth mentioning that I've now seen something I wouldn't have imagined possible. A filmmaker edited scene that was distracting and ill-conceived. Hollywood has a lousy rep for remakes of foreign movies. The list is exhaustive and too boring to go into here. Let's just say William Manahan's reworking of Sue F. Mack and Felix Zhang's script of Infernal Affairs 2002 is blistering. That means it's so hot it might melt your earwax. Take care. These words leave scars. Martin Scorsese hasn't done anything as perfectly structured since Goodfellas. If the ending is too Shakespearean for your cynical taste and the final shot too silly for something so focused, forgive the man. After messy, overblown mishaps like Gangs of New York, the maestro of Mean Streets is back with a vengeance. Set in Boston, this is a story of corruption and the police force, organized crime, undercover moles, and violent death. Billy Costigan, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Colin Sullivan, Matt Damon, went through a police academy. No, not that one. Together, although they didn't know each other, both are separately selected by Aquaman, Martin Sheen, and interrogated by his guard dog, the man Mark Wahlberg, for inclusion into a special unit dedicated to the arrest of the city's big bad wolf, Frank Costello. Jack Nicholson, a gangster of considerably influence, charm, and cunning, who is also a psychopath, and extremely dangerous to know. Costigan is put undercover to infiltrate Costello's gang, while Sullivan has always been a Frank's boy. Two moles, two sides, both ensconced and vulnerable, playing a deadly game. On the surface, Sullivan looks the cooler. He's a calculating, efficient, and effective liar. Costigan takes punishment, grits his teeth, and keeps his head down, but he has a sharp fuse and can erupt at any moment. Also, he's stressed to the edge and can't sleep. At times, he thinks he's going nuts, which is how he meets Melanie Vera, a psychologist, who happens to be Sullivan's girlfriend, a subplot too far perhaps, despite a storyline that twists itself into knots. The performance is area riveting, the pace electric, and the dialogue as tough as a locker room of homophobic rat catchers. The violence is unapologetically painful and the tension as both Queenan and Costello suspect a spy in their midst tightens around Thea's throat. At some point, Sullivan and Costigan must face each other, but wary and how will they survive that long? Scorsese controls Nicholson's penchant for playing the panda villain. Frank is a survivor because he fakes friendship. No one gives a dare, he tells Sullivan. You have to take it. What Nicholson can do is lure the audience into the nest of his jackness and the neat theme alive. Never trust a smile so well rehearsed when he still has the eyes of a hawk. This is acting a lot cream, the real nugget. DiCaprio continues to captivate under Scorsese's tutelage. Costigan is not a hero like the old movie stars who never took a bullet. He's trapped in his cage, increasingly terrified as Costello's ruthless insanity becomes ever more prevalent. DiCaprio conveys this finger-leg terror with beautifully disguised machismo. Damon understands corporate man, the body language and the predatory alertness. In Copsville, where Buddy S will break your balls, Sullivan dodges neatly into a position of power. He knows the moves and never lets any close. Not even malign. Although he cannot pretend like any other schmucking luck, Damon does cold like an ice cream on a stick. Martin Scorsese has got his groove back, or most of it, with what is arguably his best picture since Goodfellas, a big, brash, splatteringly violent mob opera starring Jack Nicholson giving it the full Pavarotti. With an outrageous and outrageously enjoyable performance that doesn't so much go over the top as go over the atmosphere. The Departed is a tale of Boston Irish tough guys on both sides of the law. Matt Damon gives the best performance of his career as the creepy and conceited young wise guy Colleen Sullivan who becomes a copyright of South Boston's biggest gangster-jing a sociopath Frank Costello played by Nicholson. Costello secretly sponsors Colin through Police Academy to become his personal executive class on the inside. Meanwhile, Leonardo DiCaprio's William Costigan, a moody kid with a brace of uncles known to the authorities who is now genuinely trying to make Ida over to the right side of the tracks with a career in the police. He is headhunted by senior intelligence officers, fatherly Martin Sheen, and his attack dog Lieutenant Mark Wahlberg, will offer him a new opportunity. Use his family connections and credibility to go into deep cover in Costello's gang. It's a remake of the 2002 Hong Kong thriller Infernal Affairs with Tony Leung and Angelo, and where that movie emphasized a cool and elegant symmetry between the doppelganger fins with a storyline indirect and the violence kept relatively low. Scorsese's movie He crosses the T's, stomps the skulls and puts Rolling Stones numbers on Thea's soundtrack. William Monan's Firecracker script cleverly channels Thea's skirling of bagpipes that we heard in the original from the band of Thea colonially influenced Hong Kong police. Now those bagpipes are anything but colonial. They are the sound of Catholic Celtic Boston in full cry. Pure angry brawn, tribally committed, territorially obsessed. The musical people who get their retaliation in first. The Chinese motif surfaces perhaps in homage to the source material with the plot MacGuffin about Costello selling stolen military computer hardware to some Beijing hardmen and showing no great respect for his customers' culture when they appear noted to have the money. Damon and DiCaprio are nicely contrasted where Sullivan is a smooth of face and style. Costigan is resentful, hunched and clenched as if wearing a wire coat hanger under his jacket. He just has to sit there and take it when he is arranged very witty by Mark Wahlberg's magnificently abusive undercover cop Dignam for no reason other than to subject him to a little forensic ball busting. Costigan makes the mistake of coming back at him with a quotation from Hawthorne and Dignam what's the matter you don't know any Shakespeare. Frank Costello wearing his own learning lightly at one stage taps his head with a gravitas and growls, "Hey, Heavy light S is the crown. Everyone gets good lines in a Manahan's screenplay, but the lion's share understandably goes to Nicholson himself. Each witizes him a diamond in the most dangerous rough imaginable. Having menacingly asked after the ailing mother of one of his courtiers and been told that she is on the way out, Nicholson grins as if receiving good news. "We all are?" he declaims. "Act accordingly." And he certainly does, growling and snarling like an aggregate of the previous dark destroyers in his career. And incidentally finishing the movie with a half-moon gat of blood on his lower lip as if repping his Joker from the Batman movies. What a barn-tormer this is from Nicholson. The kind of fat performance that no one else could possibly do, but which he could probably do in his sleep and in his more heavy-lidded moments, gives the impression of actually doing without it ever being less than fantastic value for money. At one stage, musing angrily in all the presence of a suspected rat in his ranks, Nicholson actually does an impression of a rat. Two big front teeth suddenly popped out over his lower lip and the great snubs twitch malevolently. "I can't see Pacino or Darrow getting away with it." Whistler once said his exorbitant fees were not for the hours of work at the easel but for the experience of a lifetime. And that is what we are getting with Nicholson. A great screen actor whose charisma has through the decades rolled over like a recurring lottery jackpot. Will the 69-year-old Nicholson get a part like this with a director like this ever again? As for Scorsese, it is a return to the flu and a muscle-flexing movie-making with a visible directorial signature. Gangs of New York, though very good, was typical. This is an unapologetic, an earnest crime family drama which the director puts over like a roundhousey punch. It certainly felt like a work from Scorsese's golden years, given it has seen an old-fashioned porno cinema of the sort once patronized by Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver and which surely ceased to exist long ago. Scorsese has hit his stride again and he has produced something with as much gusto as his best films of 20 or 30 years back. It grips and shocks and entertains, all with the help of a first-class writing from Monahan, firing off a dialogue of which Mammoth would be proud. Scorsese, that American movie giant, has never been asleep exactly, but now he is very much awake. Martin Scorsese, you did not mean that in a bad way. I'm just saying he got a tendency to make good movies with a fair amount of well-known and good actors. Take for example Wolf of Wall Street or Shutter Island. Those are the more recent examples. How about we go back a few more years? Not all the way back to Goodfellas. Back to 2006, which was a good year for movies. This year, Scorsese made one of the so-called powerhouses of the year. But what does this dude think of that specific movie? We are now in Boston. The story follows several different characters, but the main focus is set on two characters and their separate yet connected storylines. First up, we have the one of Colin Sullivan, Matt Damon, a recently examined undercover state cop, but he isn't there to be a cop. He was pretty much planted there by mobster Frank Costello, Jack Nicholson to be a sort of mole for him. Then we have the second main storyline following William Billy Costigan, Leonardo DiCaprio, who is set as a sort of polar opposite of Colin. He is sent by Captain Quinnan, Martin Sheen, and the known Staff Sergeant Dignam Mark Wahlberg to infiltrate Costello's gang. And both the main characters, Sullivan and Costigan, were trying to figure out who is the raid of each respective crew. So, it is pretty much a game of cat and mouse, without a specific cat, mouse, kind of like Death Note. So, yeah, the story is pretty damn interesting with this cat and mouse game. Fun fact about the story, it is a remake of the 2002 Hong Kong movie Infernal Affairs. Another good point to mention about the story is that Damon's character strikes up a relationship with psychiatrist Millennia Madanvir Farmiga, so I really like the story because of how engaging it is and how it never gets boring even though it's 2.5 hours. The characters are complex and I want to hit them in the face, except for Costello. That is because I love Nicholson, but these characters are complex and well acted. I love that. I have nothing more for this. The music in Thieves is really good. It is a combination of licensed songs, most notably the song I'm Shipping Up to Boston by Dropkick Murphys. Then there are a whole bunch of original songs composed by the fantastic Howard Shaw. Lord of the Rings a trilogy, Hobbit movies, Hugo. So yes, the soundtrack is really awesome. Matt Damon, Leonardo DiCaprio, Jack Nicholson, Mark Wahlberg, Martin Sheen, Alec Baldwin, Ray Winstone, Vera Farmiga, Anthony Anderson, Kevin Aquarian, Robert Wahlberg. This list is massive. Also, this movie looks beautiful. It is really well directed. Alright. We've made it to release time for Scorsese's new epic, Killers of the Flower Moon. To celebrate, I'm reviewing yet another one of his heavy-hitting crime thrillers, The Departed. The Departed is a fast-paced, intense film set in the seedy underbelly of Boston. It's a complex, brilliant Best Picture Oscar winner that constantly keeps you on your toes. The film follows two central characters, Billy Costigan, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Colin Sullivan, Matt Damon, as well as Frank Costello, Jack Nicholson, and Queen Martin Sheen. DiCaprio gives an exceptional performance portraying the complicated Costigan, an undercover cop infiltrating the Irish mob. His scenes with mob boss Costello are especially electrifying. The main themes of the film are corruption and loyalty. Most of the film's time is spent with the police department chasing after Costello, with all of their attempts being thwarted by the efforts of him all. This leads to a cat-and-mouse chase where the stakes are death or life in prison. Scorsese's direction makes for another classic hit. The film feels grounded and authentic to Boston, and his use of classic music like "You Gimme Shelter" by the Rolling Stones just adds another layer of sophistication to the film. Although complex, the dialogue written by William Monahan is witty, clear, and easy to follow. Many films can get caught up in a complicated story and it can be a detriment to the film. That isn't an issue here. As with many Scorsese films, one of the main themes is morality. The Departed specifically deals with corruption and the blurred lines of good and evil when caught between both sides. The moral dilemmas in the film create tension-filled sequences that flesh out the characters and their motivations. Scorsese is a master at doing things naturally, never forcing character development. This film isn't underrated in the slightest, winning many awards, including Scorsese's only Best Director Academy Award. However, I wanted to highlight it as we very well could be seeing his next multi-award-winning film this week. This film has everything you want and more in a crime film. You don't know where this sits in the canon of Martin Scorsese films, at least by a consensus, and I don't know if this is considered one of his best, but it's only of my faves. I find The Departed an easier watch than, say, Taxi Driver 1976 or A Bronx Tale 1993. Maybe because characters in those films descend into moralizing so claustrophobically that they leave a little breathing room for the viewer to reflect. And right up there with Goodfellas 1990 and Casino 1995 comedy, though for very different, let's show you reasons. The Departed is Scorsese's The Wire, South Boston Nights. The duality within the forces at play in both the police and in organized crime is explored through two knights at opposite ends of the chessboard. Matt Damon's a corrupt internal affairs investigator and Leonardo DiCaprio's deep undercover cop are products of the city and the system, and Jack Nicholson's murderous criminal kingpin is the endgame. It's a riveting, nail-biting exploration of the duality through both the performances and the filmmaking. The Departed marks only the second, I think, in the clearly creatively fruitful Scorsese DiCaprio partnership. Gangs of New York before this, Shutter Island and Wolf of Wall Street after, and it's wonderful to see the colors shown here in DiCaprio's frantic twitchy portrayal of the understandably strung out Billy. Really, everyone here shows something unusual and alive, and each character presents his own duality, a charismatic but impotent Matt Damon, and hilarious and overstressed Alec Baldwin. Foul-mouthed but surprisingly well-read Mark Wahlberg. Jack Nicholson kind of pulls me out of the story a little. He's as terrifying as his character is supposed to be, with such a large cast of multifaceted characters. This sausage fest of a white ensemble could have included more than a single white female Vera, but well, actually, I won't. And then that statement cues really. From a structure and editing perspective, The Departed is also a masterclass in cross-cutting between stories. What's impressive isn't that the film juggles multiple intersecting narratives, but how it juggles, bringing one arc to its boiling point, then switching over to the next to raise the heat a little, either before switching to another to stir the pot a little more, then back again, all while not only never losing a sight, but palpably exploring its themes. It's a technique the wonderful at every frame painting explains by, well, doing Best Picture Academy Award winner. The Departed boasts a respectably pedigree. The cop thriller was directed by Martin Sheen, edited by Thelma Schoonmaker, shot by Michael Ballhaus, accompanied by Howard Shore's music, adapted by William Monahan from the 2002 Hong Kong hit Infernal Affairs, and it stars Leonardo DiCaprio, Matt Damon, Jack Nicholson, Martin Sheen, Alec Baldwin, Mark Wahlberg, and 2005 Los Angeles Film Critics Best Actress winner Vera Farmiga. That The Departed turned out to be a generally efficient entry in the cop flick genre should come as no surprise to anyone. What I found somewhat surprising is that the score's effort that would finally earn the veteran director an Oscar turned out to be a little more than an A-budgeted run-of-the-mill B-movie, one that happens to be both way overlong and laughably absurd, and that features some of the worst overacting ever captured on camera. The multiple award-winning Jack Nicholson is responsible for some of the most sensitive, well-rounded performances of the 1970s. Every few years, Nicholson still manages to create a thoroughly believable screen character. In The Departed, however, his portrayal of the Boston mobster comes across as the sort of self-indulgent, over-the-top burlesque that ruins drama even while winning critical raves and assorted awards. Oh my god. Did you see how he manages to lift one eyebrow all the way to the top of his forehead while the other goes way down to the bottom of his lower lip? That's real acting. Scorsese, who should have known better, clearly let the veteran actor do as he pleased. A mistake the director had also made several times in the past with a master scenery chewer Robert De Niro. Example, New York, New York, the king of fat comedy. Perhaps Scorsese was hoping for the Boston underworld's Randall Patrick Montgomery of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Instead, he got the male baby Johnny of the Irish Mafia. The only thing missing is the curly blonde wig. Willie Nicholson's foaming at the mouth throws The Departed completely off balance. Leonardo DiCaprio and Vera Farmiga tried to pick up the pieces, as always. Even when miscast, as Scorsese's The Aviator, DiCaprio is thoroughly convincing. Yet, Farmiga's the one who delivers the film's most authentic performance. Surrounded by a number of actors, Nicholson, Alec Baldwin, the Oscar-nominated Mark Wahlberg among others who seem to believe that more is better. The actress opted for a different route. She obstinately underplays her already underwritten character to such an extent that she ends up stealing the show. You should note that the flat homage to Carol Reed's The Third Man near the end of The Departed is not Farmiga's fault, since I haven't seen Wei Kong Lao and Alan Mack's Infernal Affairs. I don't know which of the flaws found in The Departed stem from the much shorter original and which ones were concocted by Scorsese and William Monahan and /or Studio Warner Brothers and /or Films producers, but those flaws are there, ranging from the thriller's frequent lack of thrills and its unnecessary 152-minute running time. A good half hour could easily have been excised to a literally mind-blowing finale that makes a bloody mess out of heads, logic, and any sense of verisimilitude The Departed might have had. Martin Scorsese's Crimea thriller, The Departed, winner of an Academy Award for Best Picture in 2006, is considered to be the director's finest take on the mob theme since Goodfellas 1990. Intermittently, he also directed Casino 1995 and Gangs of New York 2002. With many great actors involved in the film, and with such a meticulously constructed script, this is no wonder. The Departed is set in the south of Boston during the time when the police wages their war against the Irish-American criminal syndicate. The film starts off with young Colin Sullivan, Matt Damon, befriending the untouchably Lord of Crime, Frank Costello, Jack Nicholson. Years later, there emerge two cops, only a Colin Sullivan, only too ready to infiltrate the state police as an informer for Frank Costello and an author Billy Costigan. Leonardo DiCaprio, a guy who grew up in a criminal environment, who becomes a gang member working for a Costello while at the same time working as an undercover cop. When both the state police and the mob begin to suspect that there is an informer within their circle working for the other side, both Sullivan and Costigan must race against time to uncover the identity of another to save their lives. The script to The Departed, written by William Monahan, shines with complexity and intelligence, but it is actually based on a series of Chinese films shot in Hong Kong, but most evidently Infernal Affairs 2002. The Departed itself was written basing its account on the real-life events of a Boston gangster Whitey Bullier. Whitey, a vulgar tourist Boston neighborhood for over a decade, infiltrating the FBI's organized crime unit in early 1990s and using his connections to his advantage, growing in the Little Italy part of New York. It is clear why Scorsese would be taken in by the script, and his primary interest lies in the understanding the life philosophy of people who are hiding behind other people's identities. The Departed becomes a film about so many different things. It explores moral questions, people's motivations and relationships. In a way, it becomes a cinematic encyclopedia on the psychology of human behavior. The film is a real-brain teaser where knowledge is the most sought-after prize, and everyone in the film is willing to pay a very high price for it. While many films may come to mind while watching The Departed, including Face Off 1997, and Miller's Crossing 1990, the film most similar to The Departed is Donna Brasco, 1997, starring Al Pacino and Johnny Depp. The film is based on the real story of one undercover agent, Joseph Pison, who infiltrates the mafia and gets so close to the boss that he gets mafia promotions. While the two films are comparable in essence, The Departed seems 10 heads above Donnie Brasco in terms of complexity, the sheer number of plot layers, and unpredictability of the ending. The Departed gets more and more intense as it progresses, especially at the point when the informers start to have agendas of their own, and sometimes the second viewing is advisable in order to understand every detail and catch every meaning in the dialogue. The three main characters in The Departed, Colin Sullivan, Billy Costigan, and Frank Costello, can all make up their own character studies, being totally fascinating from a psychological viewpoint. Leonardo DiCaprio is excellent in the role of Billy Costigan, a man who severed his ties with crime, but still appears to work for the mob. It is DiCaprio who provides the necessary emotional input to the story. A good man torn between two worlds, at one time making a romantic connection with Sullivan's new girlfriend. DiCaprio's Martin Scorsese's Charlie Harvey Keitel from Main Street's 1973, who is a good person forced to do bad things. Matt Damon as Colin Sullivan is also good in a way he displays cynicism and opportunism, and the role is not that unfamiliar to him as he killed and took another person's identity in his previous Anthony Minghella film The Talented Mr. Ripley 1999, who steals all the limelight here is of course Jack Nicholson. And this is no because he plays the Baron of Crime, in a way he does it. He shows off his outstanding acting skills and has a magnificent screen presence. It's immediately evident in every shot he is in that his character commands authority, obedience, and respect. Isa feared all around while at the same time remaining in touch with the local community. The supporting cast Isa equally great. Martin Sheen, Alec Baldwin, and Vera Farmiga have their spotlight, but it's Mark Wahlberg in his role of abrasive detective Dignam who is virtually unrecognizable here and thus rightly gaining his Academy Award nomination in the Best Supporting Actor category. One of the problems I thought was the dialogue in this film. It is sometimes hard to follow due to the jargon used. But yet again, this only adds to Scorsese's want of realism and authenticity. Besides, the whole film is filled with such witty one-liners and quotes. Only I would be forgiven for wanting pen and a paper at hand. The dialogue is indeed polished to perfection, knows this film itself, with virtually no scene being out of tune or character unconsidered. The Departed's ending can be criticized and not unjustly, so it may appear silly or lacking in something vital. However, all this may only come to mind on the first viewing. On the second and third viewings of the film, one may suddenly realize that it may as well be acceptable that the film ended like it did. It should not be forgotten that Martin Scorsese is a man who is known for his portrayal of truth on screen, who perfects his films to achieve via honesty and realism. However brutal it may appear, Goodfellas, in stark contrast to the romanticizing of the mobile life in the Godfather trilogy. So at the end of the film, what on the first glance may appear like a comic twist a la Tarantino can actually be digressed as the desire to portray violence, events as realistically as possible with an intelligent pitch-perfect script, a never-ending list of great actors involved and outstanding directing. The Departed becomes a must-see film for everyone, especially for those who value Scorsese's work or are into gangster movies. Martin Scorsese's The Departed, a 2006 comedy, stands as a masterpiece. It is not just because of its killer script, but because of how deeply it interrogates power and legacy. Beneath the surface of this cops and robbers-style thriller lies a story about men who are searching for fathers, performing acts of violence, and slowly rotting from the inside. It is a film about guys who might be able to act tough, but they are morally confused and spiritually lost. In that sense, The Departed is not just a remake of Infernal Affairs. It is one of Scorsese's most personal statements about American corruption. It's arguably his best film of the 2000s, capping off a career that remarkably produced at least one masterpiece per decade. Scorsese is one of my favorite directors, and I would say The Departed is one of his strongest. Part of that is in the editing, the way this movie flows. It is very smooth. I would also recommend watching After Hours 1985, which is different in tone, showcasing Scorsese's versatility as a filmmaker. At the center of this film's legacy is an incredibly wild performance by Jack Nicholson as Frank Costello. He plays a crime boss who feels less like a character and more like an embodiment of American nihilism. Costello doesn't just commit crimes, he philosophizes about them and embodies a Nietzschean morality. There are also references to different writers throughout the film like Sigmund Freud, James Joyce, and Nathaniel Hawthorne. Costello's speeches, often rambling and profane, are laced with warped wisdom about strength. I don't want to be a product of my environment, I want my environment to be a product of me, Costello says at the start of the film. These monologues are some of the most quoted moments in the movie. Costello's fixation on power is revealing of his mindset. This theme reaches its most tragic expression in Matt Damon's character Colin Sullivan. Damon plays him as a man who has mastered the performance of success, a nice apartment, a respected job, and a beautiful girlfriend, but he is internally frozen and impotent. It is hinted that Colin cannot perform in the bedroom, and the film makes it clear that this is not just stress, it is identity failure. He doesn't know who he is because his entire self was shaped by Frank Costello. Costello is his father figure, mentor, and moral compass, and that is precisely the problem. Frank says, when you decide to be something, you can be it. Colin never chose his life, but instead he inherited a lie. Damon's performance is greater because it avoids hysterics. He is emotionally numb until the scene in the end in the elevator when he begs for a brief moment to be killed. His impotency in this film reflects his inability to connect honestly with anyone, including himself. This is in contrast to Leonardo DiCaprio's character, who is emotionally unraveling and wants to live an honest life. His intentions are to help society and break out of his troubled family roots. Both characters are damaged. Only one of them still feels pain, and The Departed suggests that the ability to feel pain is what keeps you human. Leonardo DiCaprio's performance as Billy Costigan is great. Billy is the opposite of Colin in every way. DiCaprio plays him as a man who is unraveling in real time as his circumstances get more dangerous. Billy is undercover in the mob, but unlike Colin, he never stops knowing who he really is. Billy's search for father figures is central to the tragedy. He is passed from only a substitute father to another, Quinan, Dignam, and even Costello himself in a twisted way. Each represents a different version of authority and aggression. None can actually save him. The system uses Billy until there is nothing left. DiCaprio's performance makes these electric. His panic attacks, paranoia, and barely contained rage are not just plot devices, they are the physical symptoms of a man whose identity is being crushed by indifference. He wants his real identity back. Billy deeply affects Dr. Meline Madden, played by Vera Farmiga, whom he meets with to discuss his PTSD. Meline cries at his funeral after he passes away. The ending implies that she is pregnant with his son. Although Billy could not be saved from his environment, his pursuit of a noble cause ultimately led him to a noble ending with a continuation of his legacy, unlike the criminals that haunted him. Mark Wahlberg as Sergeant Dignam is often remembered as comic relief, but his role is crucial to the film's moral logic. Dignam is a bad talker, profane, openly hostile to Colin and Billy, but he has a good heart. He never pretends to be something he's not. He is honest in his intentions and deeply committed to justice, even if his methods are crude. In a movie filled with guys who hide behind masks, Dignam's lack of polish becomes a form of integrity. That is why Dignam wins in the end. His execution of Colin is not framed as a heroic triumph, but it is framed as a moral resolution. He is not corrupted by the system in the same way as the others, so because he never plays the game. You can't lose a game you refuse to play. As soon as Quinan is thrown from the roof by Costello's goons, Dignam immediately resigns and disappears until his surprising final appearance. Scorsese seems to argue that in a world built on all lies, blunt honesty, even when rash, is the closest thing to virtue. The Departed is the bridge between Scorsese's classic crime operas and later moral epics. The film won 4 Academy Awards: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay, and Best Editing. It was a smash hit and a box office success for good reason. It captures the sense of distrust that permeated America in post. We also can't forget the way the characters say microprocessors. The pacing of this film is excellent, with scenes flowing naturally and at a fast pace. The Departed argues that in a system built on mistrust, the tragedy isn't that everyone betrays each other, but that no one learns another way to live. All of that murdering and no sons, yells Colin to Frank at the end of the film. The Departed endures because Ida refuses easy moral comfort. Almost everyone loses. The guys who talk the most are the emptiest. No one knows what to trust. The guys who feel the most the worst, and the one who survives long enough to deliver justice does so alone. Off the books, without applause. In a film about rats and masks, Scorsese suggests that the real tragedy is no betrayal. It is inheritance. We become what our fathers teach us unless we are brave enough to break the cycle. I'll get this out of the way right away. Via never seen any of Martin Scorsese's other gangland epics: Goodfellas, Gangs of New York, Casino, or Mean Streets, so I can't tell you how The Departed stacks up in comparison to those films. or how much of its feel is simply transported to Boston from those other films. What I can tell you is that this is an incredible movie. The Departed tells the tale of two new members of the Boston Police Department, each with connections to the Irish Mafia tracing back to their youth. Billy Costigan, Leonardo DiCaprio, who has supplanted Roberto De Niro as Scorsese's featured player, grew up in a connected family whose father kept him out of the mob, making him an ideal candidate to infiltrate the mob by going undercover. Colin Sullivan, Matt Damon, was raised under the wing of mob boss Frank Costello. Jack Nicholson, who infiltrated the state detective department and served as a mole. As each man progresses in their tasks, they become aware of the other's presence, becoming determined to keep their identity a secret while discovering the identity of the other. The dueling undercover agent story taken from the Hong Kong movie Infernal Affairs makes this movie an interesting cat-and-mouse affair, keeping it from being simply another gangster movie or a standard-issue undercover tale. Both leads do a great job exuding confidence while maintaining cover and vulnerability away from the job as the stress of living a double life at the highest stakes taxes their faculties. Damon has become a fairly underrated performer of late, making every movie he appears in better through his performance, and this one is no different. He adds complexity and a dimension to his character, keeping him from being a simple mustache-twirling bad guy. Nicholson gives his usual scenery, chewing performance as the head of bad guy, giving it all his muster in a showy performance that delivers in keeping the film exciting and tense. His Frank Costello is crazy enough to instill fear, yet intelligent enough to explain how he has managed to stay in business all these years. The excellent cast is rounded out by Mark Wahlberg as a foul-mouthed detective, allowing him to use his Boston accent for maximum effect. Martin Sheen as the wiser father figure Detective Oliver Queen. Alec Baldwin playing the foul-mouthed blue-collar character he's proven adept at since relinquishing his leading man's status. And Vera Farmiga as the naturally beautiful psychiatrist that gives glimpses into the internal struggles of both Sullivan and Costigan. The action and intensity of the movie are electric, keeping the pace of the movie flowing throughout, making the 2.5-hour running time seem to fly by. Scorsese is a master of his craft, making the movie both gritty enough to capture the tone of the movie, yet dynamic enough to not get lost in all of the grime. The story is gripping throughout with enough white-knuckly tension to keep you at the edge of your seat and enough subtlety to make you think about all its dimensions throughout. By the time the bloody third act rolls around, I was so engrossed by the proceedings that I'm not sure I blinked until the resolution had played out. With this movie, the Oscar season of 2006 has officially begun. Martin Scorsese has crafted a stunning film that's as tense, gritty, action-packed, and brilliant as any I've seen in a while. One good enough that the Academy is sure to, well, probably stiff him again. Although to be fair, there's plenty of more movies to come, and if there's better than this to come, then he should be a very happy moviegoer. Looking for multiple nominations to come out of this one. Damon, DiCaprio, Nicholson, Sheen, Farmiga, William Monahan for adapted screenplay, and cinematographer Michael Ballhaus should all warrant a consideration. The current frontrunner for Best Picture of the Year. Note everybody saying The Departed is a Martin Scorsese's best picture since Casino or even Goodfellas, and some of the overpraise has struck me as pretty condescending to Scorsese. Good boy, you stick to your mobsters now. Want you? I'll go out on a limb and say I think it's his best picture since The Aviator, adding almost an hour to the running time of Infernal Affairs, the film on which it's based. The Departed does indeed fill in some of what only a critic called the ellipses in the plot of the original film, and opens up at least as many other holes in the process. And yet, as others have also observed, Scorsese's movies have never been driven by plot but character. And in The Departed, the characters, performances, moral ambiguities, and even the filmmaking prowess itself, All of the things we treasure in a Martin Scorsese picture are not as rich or developed as those of its 2000 Hong Kong predecessor, much less Scorsese's own best and most personal work. And let me add that this is not a knee-jerk response. I'm no big fan of Hong Kong action films. What I liked about Infernal Affairs was that there was more going on than in most of the HK Crimea movies or Policy I've seen, which I thought were bursting with empty action and little else. I'm going to write more about The Departed next week, to continue what I began in my MSN movie essay, Goodfellas and Badefellas. In the meantime, I patched together some of the critical observations from others that made me go, yes. That's it. Either because I felt the same way or because they expressed something I hadn't been able to formulate for myself in my initial thinking about the movie. Meanwhile, after taking a look at these critical observations, please weigh in with comments of your own. Just to remember, it may take a while for comments to actually show up on the site. Martin Scorsese's return to the contemporary gangster genre via remake of Andrew Lau and Alan Mack's glossy stylized Hong Kong film of 2002 Infernal Affairs, has a bored beautiful a feeling as if Woody Allen had been forced to remake one of his early funny ones. The plotting is completely artificial and makes sense only within a context of self-conscious formal play. A junior member of Boston's Irish mob, Matt Damon, is assigned by his eccentric godfather, Jack Nicholson, who infiltrated the ranks of the Massachusetts State Police. At the same time, a dutiful police cadet, Leonardo DiCaprio, is assigned by his boss, Martin Sheen, to ingratiate himself with Nicholson's gang. For the first hour or so, Scorsese and his editor, Themis Schoonmaker, treated the material as a premise for a virtuoso exercise in parallel montage. The film achieves a fugue-like structure at times as Scorsese and Schoonmaker move through 3 or 4 levels of simultaneous action at once, finding the creative and sometimes quite beautiful transitions based on matching rhythms, textures, movements, and shapes. The movie works smashingly, especially if you haven't seen its Hong Kong counterpart and haven't a clue what's coming. But for all its snap, crackle, and pop, it's nowhere near as galvanic emotionally. The star of Infernal Affairs, Tony Leung, had the stillness of a volcano in the film Hero. Imadia practicing calligraphy seem fiery. DiCaprio, as good as he is on the lumpish side. He has a wide face and lots of brow to furrow, but Scorsese doesn't linger on him long enough to help us connect with his feverish alienation. It's easier to read Damon with his darting little eyes and slippery squirt smile, but we don't give a fig about him. Screenwriter William Monahan has made the character more of an out-and-out villain, a conscienceless opportunist than he was in the original. Sullivan hungers for a career in politics. He has no loyalty to anyone, not even his surrogate father, crime boss, and so he has no dramatic stature. Plus, as a lousy in bed, in moral terms, it may be the least involving story that Scorsese, an artist much preoccupied with immorality, has ever taken on. Costigona DiCaprio spends years working for a Costello Jack Nicholson, unencumbered by the legal restrictions of being a sworn policeman, but he's never forced to do anything that truly repulses him. His only on-screen transgressions are a few wobbly downs of scumbags who have it coming at anyway. Sullivan Damon takes advantage of his badge to romance a lively police psychiatrist, Vera Farmiga, but the relationship never prompts him to examine what he's doing with his life. The mentors are comparably one-dimensional. Predictably, the dirty cop is having no trouble pretending to be clean, but this very is problematic. Sullivan remains a cipher, leaving Damon with precious little character to develop. He relies on his screen charm, which can be considerable, and his Goodwill Hunting accent, which is formidable, yet it's just so much addressing on an opaque window. I wanted to mention here that I think all the performances except Nicholson's are terrific, especially Mark Wahlberg and Alec Baldwin, who are very funny. It suggests that, as these critics have noted, the actors aren't all given full characters to play. The roles played here by Damon, DiCaprio, Nicholson and especially Martin Sheen were much more fully developed and morally conflicted in Infernal Affairs. The Departed isn't the masterpiece I have the feeling some may hail as. It feels like the kind of movie critics might overpraise, if only because it's nice to see Scorsese back in the saddle and a treat to find a cops and robbers thriller with some energy and wit. In Infernal Affairs, every plot twist clicked satisfyingly into place as the fate of the two leads converged inexorably toward a central vanishing point, the good guy pretending to be bad and the bad guy pretending to be good. What better setup for a classic existential and moral riddle, but here, for every aha moment, there's an equal and opposite ouch. It's hard to get into details without spoiling something in a movie this rife with double agents and triple fake-outs. But much of the informant's surveillance conducted by a means of text messaging on barely concealed cell phones is implausible to the point of absurdity, and the ending leaves several red herrings flopping on the deck. Yes, what with bullets fired between eyes and bottles smashed to faces and severed hands encased in Ziploc bags, there's gore of plenty here, another Scorsese trademark from his vintage years. But back then the violence arose naturally and was frighteningly out of the characterizations out of the Raging Bull's jealousy or a Goodfellas temper or a taxi driver's pent up ennui. The violence however jumps haphazardly out of the twitchy plot courtesy of William Monahan's erratic script and so often seems gratuitous and organic just splattle for splatter's sake. Speaking of gratuitous, check out Nicholson. While apparently channeling the Joker, Hudson rolls his eyes and delivers a performance as slovenly self-indulgent as his greasy combo. Astonishingly, Scorsese not only does nothing to rein him in, but occasionally adds an out-of left-field sequence, the mobster in a literally operatic tryst with a couplet of coke that only encourages the guy's theatrics. The result, rarely has a star's lobotomy turned so completely torpedoed a project. Whenever the picture threatens to gain some momentum, up pops Jack to a stop it dead in its tracks. Towering over both youngsters, Jack Nicholson has the medium here vastly inflated role of the patriarchal crime boss. Eric stole Infernal Affairs with his high-spirited moon-faced malevolence. Nicholson is handed the keys to the kingdom in his first scene. Neither a debacle nor a bore, The Departed works, but only up to a point and never emotionally, even if the director does contrive to supply his version of a happy ending. I don't want to be a product of my environment. Nicholson boasts at the onset, I want my environment to be a product of me. Yeah, and that's the problem. Overall The Departed may be, it's nothing that I wouldn't have been cured by losing Jack and maybe half an hour. Too bad the bottom line meant Scorsese would to sell it that him on refos to fill his soul. Mr. Damon enters the story about the Sammy time that Mr. Nicholson exits the shadows. Too bad he doesn't stay there until the final credits. This Jan is like actor has long presented two faces for the camera, the jester called Jack and the actor named Nicholson. He has worn both faces for some of his famous roles, but over time he has grown fond of Theo's persona called Jack with his shades and master of ceremonies near, and it's hard not to think that the man has become his mask. Mr. Nicholson has some choice moments in The Departed. He owns the thrilling opening minutes and is persuasively unnerving in his earliest scenes with Billy, whom he only knows as a neighborhood loser ripe for the plucking. But as the story twists and twists some more, Mr. Nicholson begins to mix too much Jack into his characterization. In Alexander Payne's About Schmidt, he plays a man who stamped down a disappointment meant that he had to pull the performance from deep inside. He committed to the part without the help of his sidekick persona. In The Departed, he's playing bigger and badder than life with engines roaring. It's a loud, showy performance. Frank Ivana comes equipped with a trove of gaudy accoutrements. A goatee like an arrow, a leopard print robe, a bevy of babes, a severed hand, and a ridiculous fake phallus, Another actor might wear fancy accessories. Mr. Nicholson upstages them. Nicholson is often hilarious here, but I would have liked to see him mute out the wackiness a little in the interest of the movie's overall tone. The cutesy last shot, which I'll leave as a surprise for the viewer, seems complicit with the jokiness of Nicholson's performance. And it does a disservice to the seriousness, not to mention gruesome violence of much of what's gone before. Though The Departed has flourishes of black comedy throughout, it's no pricey designer. It's a truly dark movie in which many people die horribly, and ending on a goofy visual pun makes fools of the audience for caring. It's been several years since anyone has mentioned Martin Scorsese and the Sammy breath as Oscar. Yeah. He was up for it with The Aviator in 2004 and Gangs of New York in 2003, but those snorefests were only nominated because everything else in the theaters sucked ostrich dick. This man gave us movies like Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, and of course, Goodfellas. Ain't seen any of them? Get a clue and get them in your Netflix queue. The Departed promises us simple tone of something from his glory days. It doesn't fail. Sure, the plot is a bit cliched. Good cop infiltrates MAB, bad cop infiltrates FBI, but this movie definitely sets itself apart from any of the similar flicks. How simple, careful storytelling, well-shot scenes, and impeccable casting. Let's take a peek at each of these. The story of The Departed may be something we've heard and seen before, but in this incarnation, Scorsese carefully plots the backstory and builds up the tension in a very methodical manner, just like squeezing out a well-fed, although there are a few plot holes force-fed upon us. A gangster knows there is a rat in his gang and doesn't kill off the newest gang members. Cops know a mole is in the department, yet don't even think of checking mobile phone records. I didn't really mind. I was more entranced with the fine lines both moles had to walk, the moral complications, the fear of death and discovery, and the hope to be accepted by loved one under false pretenses. All of this is rolled successfully up into a well-dialogued movie. This is coupled with an old-school way of filmmaking. Nothing is filmed too brightly. Scorsese prefers to keep things on a darker level, which adds mystery and a mystique and forces the viewer to pay a closer attention to the on-screen action. A great deal of attention is spent focusing on the actors' expressions. Great nonverbal communication going on here. Most notable, however, is the casting. The Departed has quite the cast. Even thought I wouldn't necessarily piss on him if he were on fire. Leonardo DiCaprio plays a very believable kid thrust into something well above his head. Damon, who hasn't done anything of worth since Good Will Hunting, shines as a man deeply troubled by his situation. And of course, how could I forget Jack Nicholson, who plays, you guessed it, the part he was meant to play, a pompous gangster. Rounding out of the cast are notables like Wahlberg, Martin Sheen, and Alec Baldwin. Kudos to the casting directors. Now that the suckfest is over, let me piss upon The Departed's legs just a bit. As mentioned before, there are a few wow moments where you are expected to throw common sense and detective work 101 out of the door. The strong performances help to cover up these moments. But nonetheless, they're there, and the more I think about them, the more aggravated I become. The biggest drawback is the movie is 152 minutes long. That's 2.5 hours, folks. That's a long time to sit in an uncomfortable seat eating raisinets. Clearly, some of the cinematics could have been cut without a detriment to the film. All said, Scorsese has another hit on his hands. The Departed delivers on his vision, and you will not be disappointed with his latest offering, even if your ass becomes numb after sitting for the extended period of time needed to watch it. In 2002's Hong Kong cult classic film Infernal Affairs, a dizzying and a captivating story was told. The police force and the criminal underground had moles in each other's operations at the exact same time. They each knew the infiltrator was there, but not who it was. No information could be trusted, and every move either side made could possibly be detected to their enemy. The filmmakers used a metaphor that the undercover operators were no longer amongst the living, that they had surrendered their identity and entered another world of deception. The film would go on to gain cult status as a classic. And although I have not seen it, the story is still intriguing to me. Martin Scorsese has remade that film and called it The Departed. While the dense storytelling is intact, Scorsese and screenwriter William Monahan, A Kingdom of Heaven, have beefed up the story, making its characters more vivid and using the colorful world of Boston organized crime as its backdrop, in a typical Scorsese fashion. There are few characters in this film to truly root for because despite whatever good deeds they achieve, the weight of their sins pulls them down to a place they can never really receive redemption. The two main characters are entwined in an identity crisis that is twisted in a labyrinth of deceit. Only a master storyteller like Scorsese could tell us such a dense story while cultivating some amazing performances. The film begins some time ago in south of Boston, where Irish mob boss Frank Costello, Jack Nicholson, takes a young Colin Sullivan under his wing with the intention that he eventually be a mole for his crew one day. Time passes and Sullivan, Matt Damon, is in training for the Massachusetts State Police. His classmates include Regan, James Badale, Brown, Anthony Anderson, and Billy Costigan, Leonardo DiCaprio. Upon joining the state police, Sullivan begins leaking information for Costello. Meanwhile, the good cop, bad cop undercover team of Captain Keenan, A. Martin Sheen, and Sergeant Dignam, Mark Wahlberg assign Costigan, whose family has a checkered past, commit assault, go to prison, and then begin selling drugs with his cousin to get noticed by Costello for the purpose of obtaining information. They want Billy to use his shady pedigree to infiltrate his crew. Only they will know of his true mission. To everyone else, he'll be a criminal. Unbeknownst to the police, Frank Costello has his own mole inside the department. Colin Sullivan has risen through the ranks to the Major Crimes Unit, working alongside Captain Ellerby in operations that give him access to exactly the kind of sensitive information Costello needs. From his position within the department, Sullivan is perfectly placed to keep the crime boss one step ahead of law enforcement. Away from work, Sullivan begins a relationship with police psychiatrist Dr. Madeleine Madden, who counsels many of Boston's officers. Meanwhile, Billy Costigan is living a dangerous double life, committing crimes alongside Costello's trusted lieutenant, Mr. French, while secretly gathering intelligence for the police. As Sullivan gains more authority, he leads a special investigative unit that quietly steers police attention away from Costello. However, the situation becomes increasingly dangerous when Costello realizes someone close to him is leaking information and orders Sullivan to uncover the identity of the undercover informant. Martin Scorsese and longtime editor Thelma Schoonmaker craft the story with remarkable precision. The film shifts effortlessly between different locations, characters, and moments in time without ever losing its momentum. One scene places us with Billy as he's harshly criticized by his superiors. The next finds him at his dying mother's bedside. We watch the police carefully plan an operation to capture Costello, only to immediately switch perspectives and see the criminals change course to avoid the trap. Trust becomes the film's most valuable and rarest commodity. While the audience knows Billy and Sullivan's true identities, everyone else remains a mystery. Can Captain Ellerby be trusted? What about Sergeant Dignam? Are there additional undercover officers inside Costello's organization? The constant uncertainty keeps viewers questioning every character's motives. Scorsese reinforces that tension through energetic filmmaking. The camera constantly moves between conversations, while jump cuts, carefully timed sound cues, text messages, and even songs that stop abruptly create an unsettling rhythm. The film deliberately sacrifices traditional continuity to make viewers feel as disoriented and uncertain as its characters. One of the few emotional respites comes whenever Billy meets with Dr. Madeleine Madden. Although their relationship begins with conflict, she becomes the only person around whom Billy can truly lower his guard. After living under false identity for so long, he begins to lose sight of who he really is. Madeleine encourages him to find emotional balance, offering the stability he desperately needs as the psychological weight of his double life grows heavier. Scorsese then introduces another clever complication. Madeleine also happens to be Colin Sullivan's girlfriend. Whenever the tension reaches its peak, Scorsese slows the pace and lets psychological confrontation take center stage. During Costello's attempts to determine whether Billy is the informant, the director carefully hides Costello's hands from view. We hear an object fall beneath the table, watch Costello retrieve it, yet Scorsese delays revealing what it is, stretching the suspense until it becomes almost unbearable. Jack Nicholson clearly relishes every moment as Frank Costello. While traces of his unmistakable screen persona are present, this is far more than a typical Nicholson performance. He fully commits to a complex character whose unpredictable mood swings make him both entertaining and terrifying. Much like Daniel Day-Lewis's Bill the Butcher cutting in Gangs of New York, Costello dominates every scene through sheer presence. At first, Nicholson's performance may seem excessive, but as the story unfolds, it becomes clear that the unpredictability is intentional. Neither the audience nor the characters can ever tell whether Costello is joking, manipulating everyone around him, or slowly losing his grip on reality. That uncertainty keeps everyone constantly on edge. Like Gangs of New York, The Departed gradually builds toward an explosive and tragic climax. The violence, as in all of Scorsese's finest films, is brutal rather than glamorous. Every major character is affected by the bloodshed. The criminals are ruthless, while the so-called heroes are deeply flawed themselves. Moral certainty simply doesn't exist in this world. Political correctness has no place here. These characters inhabit a harsh, unforgiving environment where violence, betrayal, and corruption have become part of everyday life. Their crude language reflects the moral decay surrounding them. In such a world, survival often comes down to killing or being killed. At its heart, The Departed is about identity. Billy and Colin have spent so long pretending to be someone else that they are forced to confront difficult questions. Who are they really? Can they ever return to the lives they left behind? And after sacrificing so much, would there even be a home waiting for them? Leonardo DiCaprio and Matt Damon both deliver exceptional performances. Their characters exist in a constant moral haze, always looking over their shoulders and desperately searching for an escape. As loyalties blur and trust disappears, the film keeps audiences guessing until its unforgettable and controversial ending. Following standout performances in films such as Blood Diamond and The Good Shepherd, both actors once again demonstrate an impressive ability to choose challenging, intelligent roles. As outstanding as DiCaprio and Damon are, it's easy to understand why Mark Wahlberg earned an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. His sharp wit, biting sarcasm, and perfectly timed humor provide much-needed relief from the film's relentless tension. His performance adds balance without ever undermining the story's seriousness. Whether or not Scorsese deserved the Academy Award for Best Director in 2006 remains open to debate. The Departed may not reach the towering heights of Raging Bull, but it represents everything Scorsese does best. A gripping moral drama populated by deeply flawed, dangerous men. From Mean Streets to Goodfellas, these stories have formed the foundation of his greatest work, and The Departed proudly belongs alongside them. If his Oscar victory partly reflected recognition for a remarkable career that had long gone unrewarded, it was still richly deserved. Above all, Scorsese remains one of cinema's greatest storytellers. Watching The Departed also reminded me how demanding this reviewing project had become. This was only my fourth film, yet each review requires a significant investment of time and energy. After getting home from work much later than usual, I honestly wondered whether I'd have enough time to watch and review a film as long and complex as The Departed. Teaching often means bringing extra work home, making evenings especially busy. Despite that, I finished the film and I'm genuinely glad I did. With an 8.5 rating on IMDb and a 91% score on Rotten Tomatoes, The Departed more than lives up to its reputation. It's an intense, brilliantly crafted crime thriller that rewards patient viewers with unforgettable performances, masterful direction, and one of the most gripping stories in modern cinema. I'm a huge fan of Martin Scorsese, and The Departed had been on my watch list for years. After finally watching it, I can confidently say it's one of my favorite films from his incredible career. One of the things I loved most was how unpredictable the story was. I never knew what was coming next, and the constant suspense kept me completely invested from beginning to end. About half an hour into the movie, I convinced my wife to join me. It took a little explaining to catch her up on the story, but within just a few minutes, I could tell she was just as hooked as I was. The performances were outstanding across the board. Leonardo DiCaprio, Matt Damon, Jack Nicholson, Mark Wahlberg, Martin Sheen, and Vera Farmiga delivered unforgettable performances that elevated the film. Interestingly, Leonardo DiCaprio received an Academy Award nomination for Blood Diamond instead of The Departed that year. Although both performances earned him Golden Globe nominations, while he didn't win either award, The Departed went on to win 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director, honors that were absolutely well-deserved. Despite the film's lengthy runtime, I was completely absorbed from start to finish. The story revolves around organized crime, but instead of focusing solely on gangsters, it explores the dangerous world of undercover police officers, corrupt cops, and hidden identities. The dual lives of the main characters create incredible tension, making every scene feel unpredictable. I found myself constantly wondering whether Billy Costigan, played brilliantly by Leonardo DiCaprio, would survive. Jack Nicholson's portrayal of the ruthless crime boss Frank Costello was unforgettable, bringing a chaotic and intimidating presence to every scene. At the same time, Matt Damon's performance as Colin Sullivan, a police officer secretly working for the MOBA, was equally compelling. As the story reaches its explosive conclusion, the shocking twists make Sullivan's betrayal even more disturbing. For years, I'd heard friends praise this film, but when it was first released, serious crime dramas weren't really my thing. At that point in my life, I preferred action-packed blockbusters and light-hearted comedies. Ironically, I ended up owning The Departed by accident after forgetting to decline a Columbia House movie selection. The DVD arrived. I decided to keep it, and it sat unopened on my shelf for nearly a decade. It wasn't until much later, encouraged by a movie challenge and the release of the Revanada, that I finally decided to watch it. Looking back, I only wish I hadn't waited so long. I would happily give The Departed a 9 out of 10. Released in 2006, The Departed is an American crime thriller directed by Martin Scorsese. The film became one of the biggest successes of his career, both critically and commercially, winning 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Film Editing. Set in Boston, the story follows 2 men living double lives. Colin Sullivan, played by Matt Damon, is the copyright copyright of Irish-American crime boss Frank Costello, portrayed by Jack Nicholson. Sullivan secretly serves as Costello's mole within the Massachusetts State Police. On the other side is Billy Costigan, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, a young police recruit selected by Captain Oliver Queen, Martin Sheen, and Staff Sergeant Sean Dignan, Mark Wahlberg, to go undercover and infiltrate Costello's criminal organization. As both the police and the mob realize they have been infiltrated, Sullivan and Costigan desperately try to uncover each other's identities while protecting their own secrets. What follows is an intense game of cat and mouse, with each man coming dangerously close to exposing the other. Adding another layer of intrigue, it is eventually revealed that Frank Costello has also been working as an FBI informant. After discovering this betrayal, Sullivan murders Costello to protect himself. Costigan then attempts to end his undercover assignment and expose Sullivan as Costello's mole. However, before he can do so, he is unexpectedly killed by another corrupt police officer. Sullivan eliminates the dirty cop to cover his tracks and appears to escape justice. But the story delivers one final twist. Returning home, Sullivan is confronted and executed by Sergeant Dignam, bringing the film to a dramatic and satisfying conclusion. The Departed is a remake of the acclaimed 2002 Hong Kong crime thriller Infernal Affairs. The film also marked a major milestone in Martin Scorsese's career, earning him his first Academy Award for Best Director after decades of acclaimed filmmaking. Jack Nicholson's unforgettable performance as Frank Costello was loosely inspired by notorious Boston crime boss Whitey Bulger, and many of his scenes were partially improvised, adding an unpredictable edge to the character. Ultimately, The Departed is a gripping crime thriller that blends suspense, action, betrayal, and psychological drama into one unforgettable experience. With its masterful direction, razor-sharp screenplay, unforgettable twists, and an exceptional ensemble cast, it remains one of Martin Scorsese's finest achievements and one of the greatest crime films ever made. Jack Nicholson delivers a commanding performance as Frank Costello, the ruthless leader of Boston's most powerful criminal syndicate. His empire thrives on extortion, drug trafficking, and relentless violence, making him one of the city's most feared crime bosses. Determined to bring Costello down, Police Captain Oliver Queenan, Martin Sheen, and Staff Sergeant Sean Dignam, Mark Wahlberg, launch a risky undercover operation. They recruit recent Police Academy graduate Billy Costigan, Leonardo DiCaprio, whose troubled family history and carefully fabricated criminal record allow him to infiltrate Costello's inner circle. However, what the police don't realize is that Costello already has his own insider within the department. That insider is Staff Sergeant Colin Sullivan, Matt Damon, a rising star in the Massachusetts State Police, highly respected by his superior, Captain Ellerby, Alec Baldwin. Sullivan secretly works for Costello, feeding him confidential information and ensuring the crime boss always stays one step ahead of law enforcement. As both Billy and Sullivan become increasingly entangled in their dangerous double lives, they each begin a relationship with psychiatrist Dr. Madeleine Madden, Vera Farmiga. The emotional pressure of maintaining their false identities pushes both men toward their breaking points. Eventually, Costello and Captain Queenan each discover that mole exists within their organizations, setting the stage for a deadly battle where trust disappears and survival becomes the only goal. Written by William Monahan as an adaptation of the acclaimed 2002 Hong Kong thriller Infernal Affairs, The Departed is a hard-hitting crime drama filled with tension, violence, and non-stop intensity. At 151 minutes, the film arguably runs longer than necessary. The second half spends considerable time focusing on the desperate hunt for the opposing mole, and while the paranoia is justified, the pacing occasionally slows. Even so, the film overcomes these issues through its gripping atmosphere and compelling characters. Costello, Costigan, and Sullivan constantly manipulate, deceive, and outsmart one another in a brutal struggle for power and survival. Martin Scorsese creates a harsh world dominated by aggression, intimidation, and constant conflict. The police department is portrayed as a place filled with competing agendas, suspicion, and internal corruption, while Costello's criminal organization survives only through fear and the unstable authority of a paranoid leader. On both sides of the law, loyalty is fragile and betrayal is inevitable. Dr. Madeleine Madden is the story's primary female character, but compared to the larger-than-life personalities surrounding her, she often feels disconnected from the central conflict, serving mainly as an emotional link between the two undercover rivals. One of the film's greatest strengths is William Monahan's razor-sharp screenplay. Long before the bullets start flying, the characters engage in unforgettable verbal battles packed with witty insults, dark humor, and memorable one-liners. Conversations become psychological duels, with every exchange carrying as much weight as the violent confrontations that eventually follow. Combined with an exceptional cast, These moments elevate The Departed into an intense battle of intelligence as much as physical survival. The cast is one of the film's biggest highlights. Leonardo DiCaprio and Matt Damon deliver outstanding performances as two men risking everything to maintain their carefully constructed identities. Jack Nicholson commands every scene with his unpredictable portrayal of Frank Costello, while Martin Sheen, Alec Baldwin, and Mark Wahlberg provide excellent supporting performances. Although Nicholson receives plenty of screen time, the film could arguably have benefited from giving Baldwin, Sheen, and especially Wahlberg even larger roles. The climax erupts into a shocking wave of violence and bloodshed that certainly delivers surprise and emotional impact. However, the rapid succession of deaths also weakens some of the carefully built tension. Once nearly everyone becomes a potential victim, the intricate cat-and-mouse game that has unfolded throughout the film loses some of its dramatic payoff. There is little doubt that Martin Scorsese has directed even greater masterpieces throughout his career. Films such as Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, and Goodfellas remain stronger artistic achievements and are often considered more deserving of the recognition that eventually came with The Departed. Nevertheless, the film finally earned Scorsese the Academy Award for Best Director, correcting one of Hollywood's most discussed oversights. At its core, The Departed is a gripping story about conflicted men trapped in dangerous circumstances where deception, ambition, and survival collide. These morally complex worlds have always been Scorsese's greatest strength, and the film showcases his talent for creating unforgettable crime dramas. For fans of crime thrillers, The Departed is essential viewing. It combines memorable dialogue, brutal action, and one of the strongest ensemble casts of its era. At its best, it reaches the same thrilling heights as films like Heat and The Usual Suspects, even if it doesn't quite maintain that level through its conclusion. The story follows Billy Costigan, an undercover police officer climbing the ranks of Boston's criminal underworld, while Colin Sullivan secretly protects that same criminal empire from inside the police department. Their parallel lives create constant suspense as each desperately searches for the other's true identity. The supporting cast including Martin Sheen, Alec Baldwin, Mark Wahlberg, and Jack Nicholson makes this one of the most star-studded crime films of the decade. That said, the film isn't without flaws. Certain plot developments require a generous suspension of disbelief, and some logical inconsistencies stand out upon closer examination. The romantic subplot feels underdeveloped, and viewers familiar with infernal affairs may find the original film tighter, more emotionally satisfying, and ultimately superior. Jack Nicholson's attempt at a Boston accent is also somewhat distracting, especially considering the strength of his natural screen presence. Still, the positives far outweigh the negatives. The screenplay is packed with memorable one-liners, the performances are consistently excellent, and Mark Wahlberg nearly steals every scene he's in with his sharp wit and fearless attitude. The film keeps audiences guessing until the very end, maintaining suspense over how every storyline will ultimately connect. Scorsese's confident direction keeps the narrative engaging despite its lengthy runtime. Like Inside Man, the story remains easy to follow while constantly introducing new twists and complications. Even viewers unfamiliar with infernal affairs will likely find the film fresh, gripping, and highly entertaining. Does The Departed deserve every bit of the overwhelming critical acclaim it received? Opinions will differ, particularly among fans of the original Hong Kong film. However, regardless of where it ranks among Scorsese's greatest works, it remains a thoroughly entertaining crime thriller that rewards repeated viewings. Not every great film needs to redefine its genre. Sometimes delivering an engaging, intelligent, and highly entertaining experience is more than enough. The Departed succeeds on those terms, making it one of the standout crime dramas of the 2000s. Directed by Martin Scorsese and written by William Monahan, The Departed is based on the Hong Kong classic Infernal Affairs. The film was produced by Brad Pitt and Plan B Entertainment, with cinematography by Michael Ballas, editing by Thelma Schoonmaker, and a memorable score by Howard Shore. Distributed by Warner Brothers Pictures, it premiered on September 26, 2006, with a runtime of 151 minutes. Produced on a budget of approximately $90 million, the film earned $291.5 million worldwide, becoming both a critical and commercial success.